Okay, let's finish up chapter 19, section 1 here. We're in part 3, and we'll be talking about how Latin America gains its independence. Of course, you know, the hypocrisy of it all is that there were people here first who, they're just eradicated. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But understand Latin America, of course, from the northern part of Mexico all the way down to the southern part of Chile or even Argentina, right near Antarctica. And I wanted to just, this is some of the architecture that's down there, and we're going to talk more about that. This stuff just becomes all the more fascinating to me as the more I look, the more I can't believe what I'm seeing. But as for the colonial era, in Latin America, understand we have, as always, this caste system in place, this sort of this triangular formation. We see it everywhere, every culture, the elite at the top and everybody else down below. And of course, if you were born in Spain and then you came over, you're part of the Peninsulare caste right here. If you're born in the New World, but your mom and dad are both from Spain, let's say, you're a Creoles, right? And if you have a Spanish father, you had an Indian mother, you're part of this group, and then of course everybody else is down here. Sometimes this is called peasants, undesirables, Indian slaves, whatever you want to call it. Insert that name right there. We could even talk about this in modern day sense. Of course, we're all down here, but they call us something else. I believe they call us the middle class, to make us think that there's another section below. But let's move on. What else do we have here? All right, so I'm going right to the textbook here. Over the years, growing discontent with the economic restrictions and political corruption of Spanish rule gave rise to independence movements. Okay, independence movements obviously over in Latin America. Most of these movements found support among many of the educated people in Latin America. So clearly we're not talking about the natives, the Mesoamerican Indians, but we're talking about people born in Europe that want freedom, that want, to rule themselves, influenced by Locke, Voltaire, and Rousseau. Clearly, any South American native would have nothing, no understanding of this. What are that? Who are those guys, right? So we're talking about Europeans in the New World who want freedom. And we got a problem, though, going on in Spain. Okay, we got the Napoleonic Wars going on. So Napoleon is running roughshod all over the place. And he's going to go into Spain, take over, but his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, now becomes the ruler of Spain. So the French, even though, the Bonapartes are from Corsica, but we have the French controlling Spain. And that's not going to sit well with colonists from Spain who are in South America or Latin America. So Spanish colonists, they're not going to tolerate French rule. So let's talk about some of these guys. Here we have José de San Martin. And he does not want to be controlled by the French, who now have control of the Spanish army. And we'll see him basically liberating, if you will, Peru and Chile. Now, he's down here in the south. And here's what you might see. He led an army over the Andes Mountains. Here we see the Andes Mountains running all the way to free Chile and Peru from the Spanish, who are obviously now puppets of the French, you might say. So that's San Martin. And of course, in the north, we want to talk about Simon Bolivar, right? Another guy in a similar situation. I don't want to be controlled by the French. Or I can just look at this as an opportunity for me to take over. And we'll call him the Liberator. The Liberator. You might see that again. The Liberator. He freed the northern portion of South America. The Liberator. Not really liberating anybody, but setting himself up as ruler. Liberating from Spain or France. But, I mean, you can see how the history is recorded, right? There were people here. We're going to talk about them in a minute. And that society's eradicated. It is just written out of the books, completely to be forgotten for the most part. We pay it some lip service, but let's finish up here. Understand, Portugal and Spain were the big boys on the block. This is like 94. They have the Treaty of Tordesillas right here. And what they're saying is Portugal is going to... see, this is incorrect. This is an incorrect map. Portugal should be listed here, and Spain should be listed here. I apologize for that. I found this on the internet and didn't really look at it that closely. But Portugal wants this area because they want to remain in India. Portugal was the first to really circumnavigate, south of Africa to get up here to India and end all this overseas trade, monopolized by the Italians. And then we have Columbus and that stuff. They're venturing out further, and so these two countries decide we'll stay out of each other's way. Treaty of Tordesillas, I think 1494, and this will play a part, and we'll see why Brazil is Portuguese. So we talked about the Spanish, Simon Bolivar and San Martin, right, from Spain. And now let's take a look at what else is going on. Back in Europe, the Napoleonic Wars raging. We'll see Portugal now under assault, under siege from the French. And, the royal family will evacuate. They're going to have to leave, and they'll flee to Brazil. Here we see, so this is Portugal. They own this section here. And that's where the royal family will go. And while they're there for a while, and then after like 15 years, they'll return, but they leave their son, Dom Pedro, to remain in Brazil, and he'll set himself up as the emperor. He'll just declare himself the emperor, and he's calling the shots. And then, of course, his son gets involved in whatever. I'm not going to get into that. But that's what's going on with Portugal. Now, we start to see a pattern develop here after gaining independence, right? These South American countries, the new leaders are going to fight among themselves. Big surprise, right? Until we have these military leaders, these caudillos. You're going to see this again. This might even appear a couple times on the same test. So they'll step in. These are just strong men. They have a military. And they'll start, they'll create a dictatorship. And they'll take over. And then they'll be at the top of the triangle, or that pyramid structure. But the problems with self-government that we'll see, a great deal of political instability. It's always vying for control. Always looking over your back if you're the leader. Just look at the Roman Empire and see what happened to all of those emperors, constantly under threat from a military general who takes over. And then the next thing you know, he's murdered. Same old story as always, monopoly of land and wealth by the few. See, I think this is really the whole point. All this colonization going on. It's always there's somebody behind the scenes pulling the strings that's benefiting from all of the turmoil and chaos. The Roman Catholic Church, of course, involved. Look no further, right? Clearly they have a hand in all this. And finally, lots of racial disunity. We've talked about that already. So these are some of the problems with self-government. I think when you see this question on a test, it'll say something about the Roman Catholic Church being weakened. But that is not the case whatsoever. No, sir. Just gaining more wealth, more power. You have to wonder, and I don't mean to pick on the RCC, but it's just low-hanging fruit. What do you need with all of that money? Why? Why doesn't anybody... well, you know what? I'll leave it alone. Let's move on here. So here's a test question you might see. Latin American countries experienced great instability in government after gaining independence. That should be very obvious because it is true. We just went over this. Now I'm going to close out here. Again, we were talking about these indigenous peoples of South America and Mexico, Latin America. And here we're looking at, I believe this is Aztec architecture, or what we might consider Aztec architecture, but I don't know. Understand back then, the technology, you had a horse and you had a hammer. I mean, how do you come up with the engineering? Forget the actual construction, but, the mathematical precision. Of course, we can look to the Sumerian Empire and this stuff existed, but, this stuff is simply beyond, it's almost beyond comprehension. How, I wish we could zoom in and just see the detail. How were these things built? Why are they built? Who built them? I don't think the Aztec Indians built them. I believe that they found them and occupied them, perhaps. I don't know. This is just very strange, in these cultures that existed over here in the New World, and they existed in Europe as well. We can look to Europe and see all kinds of incredible things. In Asia, this looks like something out of Thailand or Vietnam or something like that. This looks very Asian, but these things are all over the world, as are these pyramids. Here we have Tenochtitlan, which is Mexico City today, but at one time, and this is something you'd see like in a science fiction book. Now, I understand this is an artist's rendition here, and I think that these buildings were much bigger. The people were probably much smaller in relation, but again, what kind of a society? Who built this stuff? No one knows, and it's like the all these conquistadors come over, and it's always about colonization. Here we see Mexico City, or Tenochtitlan was an island. You had to take a bridge to get over here. Cortez, let's not even bother getting into that, but it's almost like they came over here with the intent of sort of destroying or hiding or something. We don't want anyone to know what was going on. Who built these things? The engineering, the architecture here. It's just fascinating to me. Here we have something in Rio de Janeiro, these aqueducts. Clearly, the builder were, somehow affiliated. This is from Rome. These are the famous Roman aqueducts. Who builds this? And I think the history is, the Europeans came over and they felt sad and felt, bad. They wanted to help the. I don't buy that at all. I don't buy that. These things, to me, I think these existed before anyone came over. They existed long before this colonization period. These things are built to withstand time. These things could be, who knows how old. And of course we go down, I think this is down by the Incas. I just find this fascinating as well. The precision with which these stones are put together, there is no way, now, how do you build something like this? But these things are, I think these things are poured in place. It's like the stone is liquefied and it's poured into some sort of a mold because, the precision, it's perfect. I don't even think this could be done today. This is clearly not the work of, a hammer and chisel and carving stone. There's just no way. Look at this rock right here. There's a 90-degree, this had to have been melted down somehow and then formed, probably poured in place like concrete. It's the only thing that, again, what do I know? But this is the stuff that existed before any Europeans got over there, in my opinion. And then, of course, we have this other problem. Look at this. These aerial photos of the Nazca lines. They go on in this article and they say, it wouldn't have been that hard to make something like this. You get the flat ground and then, you can sort of draw a small picture and then kind of expand it on the ground. I don't know. That's just, I don't think so. It's just too intricate. But, you can't notice these pictures until you're way up in the air. So what is the point? Why are they making these things? You couldn't do this and then just look down at your feet and go, look what we've done. We made this incredible, these animal pictures here. This is obviously designed for people that are flying around way above the ground. And again, we're like 1,000, 2,000 BC. Am I to believe that they had some sort of a means to fly? I mean, these are questions that remain unanswered. So I just can't help but think, all this stuff going on, all this conquest, all this colonization, what on earth was going on over here? And, of course, we have no access to anything. We're just, at the mercy of what little tidbits they give us. So, anyway, we'll close out Chapter 19, Section 1, Part 3, and we'll move on to Section 2.